All right. To my guest, thank you so much for being on the show. How you doing? How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Thank you for having me.
Of course, y'all. We are with a world-renowned journalist on our show. So I am super excited to have him on. I was telling him off the air that it's not too many books that bring me to tears, but I feel like your book was just so amazing. And one of the things that I really loved about your book is obviously it has so many different layers that can resonate with a lot of people. But for me, I just love the journey that we saw from a young boy feeling abandoned to a man who found pride and understanding for both of his parents.
I think that's a very good way to summarize it. I mean, you summarize it neatly because there are a lot of layers.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, it's a detective story trying to solve a mystery about my missing mom.
Mm-hmm.
In other ways, it's kind of a coming of age story. Then it's kind of a ghost story.
Mm-hmm.
It's saying something about spirituality and religion, but at heart, I think it's about me trying to figure out who my mom was and figure out who I am too. And I think that's part of the story that appealed to me is that you saw me change from
Yeah.
as a young man to an older man, and I changed the ways I didn't expect. And so did this family that I never knew. When I met them, they changed the ways I never expected. So I like stories that show people not being static, but just grow and change, particularly
Yeah.
if it's non-cliche, non-expected ways. And that's what happened to happen to me.
Yeah, we need Jordan Peele to make this into a movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I love that.
What was the most difficult part of writing your story, especially with dealing with such personal and painful family history?
To be honest, I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
most difficult part when you write a memoir, you write a story about yourself, because the temptation is to hide, to not be as vulnerable, to make
Mm-hmm.
yourself seem like you were more together than you really were
Mm-hmm.
at the time. And to just be honest, I mean, because there's a temptation when you write to tell us stories, you want to please the audience, but
Mm-hmm.
you have to really tell the truth about what happened. So I think to me was trying to remember how I really felt in the moment, and try to describe how I really changed. I think that was the hard part. And also just to remember, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these things I wrote about were very painful. And
Mm-hmm.
so I repressed a lot of these memories. I heard people say, when you write a book, you're going to remember all these things you didn't because you repressed stuff. I said, no, that's not going to happen to me because I remember everything. But it was so true. I remembered so many details and things that I had blocked out for years. And
Mm-hmm.
so those were the hardest aspects.
Listen, you were very detailed. Like I feel
Oh,
like when
thank
I
you.
was reading it, I can actually like picture it. And I don't think I ever been to like Baltimore like that for
Oh,
me to
yeah.
remember it. Yeah, I think you did a really good job
Thank
with
you. Yeah.
describing your upbringing.
Yeah. I wanted to, I've heard people say that they felt like they were in a movie and that they felt like
Mm-hmm.
they were sitting next to me and seeing my family and seeing my neighborhood and all those things. But yeah, I wanted to do that. We live in a very visual culture, so I wanted the story
Mm-hmm.
to have a lot of vivid detail so you could feel like you were there.
Now, how have your relationships with your family changed since the release of your book?
Well, my family is strange. It hasn't really changed that much because the book was, I did all the work pretty much in the book to
Mm-hmm.
come to terms with white members of my family who didn't want anything to do with me because I'm black. My father's black. And so all the work to kind of find common ground with them to become a genuine family, all that was done in the book. So we're good. I was
Right.
worried about how, for example, my mother's sister would react to the book. And my mother's sister, for people who don't know, was a woman who was frankly very racist. It was what she grew up with, is all she knew.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't want to meet me, and I didn't meet her until my mid-20s. And when I did meet her, she would not admit to her racism. And so part of the power to me of the story is to show this person who you felt like was this irredeemable racist who could never change. You just see how she changed over the years.
Yeah.
So I was worried about how she was going to react to how I described how she used to be. But
Mm-hmm.
she was fine with it. She said, I'm glad you were honest. So um, I didn't really have any problems with people, my family. They love reading the story.
Is she still alive?
My mother's sister,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, she's still alive.
Oh, nice, nice.
Yeah, yeah. I have a great relationship with her. That's one of the That's one of my favorite parts of the book when to show the change in our relationship because like my job,
Yeah.
I'm a journalist at CNN.
Mm-hmm.
So I write a lot about race. And if you look at this election and what's happened in this country in the last couple
Mm-hmm.
of years, it seems like our racial divisions are kind of pretty much intractable. They can't, nothing's ever going to change. People aren't going to,
Right.
but my aunt, my mother's sister, is living proof that's not true because I never thought she was going to change. And she did.
Yeah, but I think you did a great job because obviously we don't condone racism, but you did a really good job with humanizing her and allowing a space. Oh, he's smiling. That means
I'm
you're
glad you
proud.
said that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like, we have so much in common then when it comes to certain things. And I feel like you did a really good job of humanizing her and allowing us to see why she became the way that she became. And also a lot of things she didn't have a choice when it came to racism, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, a lot of racism is, they say, is kind of caught, not taught. You absorb
Mm,
it from your environment.
right.
You grow up with these racial attitudes that you often get from people you love and respect, like your family members. So she didn't know any better. And one of the things you said about me humanizing her made me smile because that was really important to me. I had to see that there was a line in the book where I said that what was in her was also in me.
Yeah.
And that was hard for me to say, but I grew up in this environment and in this neighborhood where
Mm-hmm.
everybody disliked or hated white people. And I absorbed that, even though my mom's white.
Right.
So I was like, she did the same thing, just in a different way. She just absorbed what she knew. And when I began to see her as a human and not as this kind of monster, that really helped us connect and really grow.
Yeah. And she was also being stubborn because I was like, come on now, girl. You know this is racist.
Yeah, yeah, but it's hard to admit that kind of thing about yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, to admit that you think of the guilt she was going carrying.
Yeah.
Her whole family had rejected me, my brother, and then she meets us in the mid-20s, and she realized that she had nothing to do with our life, and it's hard. I think for a lot of white folks to admit that you have racist attitudes is almost like admitting that you're evil or bigoted,
Mm-hmm.
instead of
Mm-hmm.
understanding that to be human is to have all these different biases, whether they're racial, it could be other type of biases about people with money or
Yeah.
different religions. So I think she didn't quite have the vocabulary to kind of give grace to herself to say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you're just being human and you can admit to it.
Yeah. Now you have spent your entire career writing about race and religion. So how did sharing your story feel different from other works? And what new understandings did you gain about yourself?
Well, that's a good question. Well, it was different because it was about me and it was
Mm-hmm.
extremely personal to admit, for example, that my mom had a mental illness and that the first place I met her was a mental institution and nobody would tell me, that she
Yeah.
had illness until I got there. That's very hard to talk about that and to talk about the kind of racial hatred that was in my mother's family. That was all personal. I couldn't be detached like I am as a journalist. Like I'm writing about
Mm-hmm.
that person. I'm writing about my own family, people I love. And secondly, how did it change me? I think well, it changed me in a lot of ways. I think one is it makes me more hopeful about people, how
Mm-hmm.
people you never think can change, can really change. And it makes me feel hopeful in a weird way about the country, about our future.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it made me, those are the big changes.
I feel like mixed children have it hard.
You do? Why do you think that?
I do because I feel like with mixed kids or mixed people, I feel like either you too black for the white people or you too white for the black people.
Well, that's a good point. And that's like what they call you're evoking the tragic mulatto myth. That,
Right.
right. And that used to be very much the case. And
Mm-hmm.
that's part of what I talk about in my book is how attitudes really shifted in my lifetime. So I'm much older than you. I'm born in the mid 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was born, what you described is true. If you were biracial, you were kind of invisible in culture. There was no Obama, there was no
Right.
Kamala Harris, there was no Jordan Peele. And in
Right.
fact, you were, in a sense, the product of an illegal union. Interracial marriage was illegal, but also any kind of interracial intimacy between
At
Black.
all. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it used to be that way. But part of what I believe is that people like my mom and my dad created this world where you can have Obama as president, where Kamala Harris can
Mm-hmm.
next be president, where I don't think it's a stigma now to be biracial. Look at Patrick Mahomes, Jordan Peele.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a lot of biracial people feel like they have to go into the closet anymore. In fact, I would say that if you look at the commercials, you see all the interracial couples, the biracial children,
Mm-hmm.
almost fashionable now to be biracial.
Yeah.
So it's a different world. How old are you?
Well, I know I look like I'm in my 20s, but
Okay.
I'll be 38 in February.
Okay, yeah, I would never guess. But
I
you know,
look
like
younger?
you look way younger. I
Okay,
thought you were
good.
like in your mid-20s or something. But like say somebody in their mid-20s and all,
Mm-hmm.
biracial, and I think about this sometimes. I'll be out and I'll see a biracial couple, their children, and I say to myself, they have no idea how much easier it is for them than it was for me or Obama or Kamala Harris.
I think about that too, and I'm not even biracial.
You do?
Yeah, I think about a lot of things that goes on within our world now, and I just think about like because I read a lot and I'm starting to get more into history, and I just be like, wow, like I just feel like back in the day you could not do this. Like a lot of things we do now is a luxury and it's a blessing.
Yeah, and I agree. And one of the things I try to point out in the book is that a lot of this took place, the kind of freedoms we have is not because of a charismatic politician or a judge, but because of ordinary actions by people like my mom and my dad. My mom
Mm-hmm.
took a tremendous risk to not only see a black man, but to give birth to two black boys in the mid 60s. She defied her family and her community. But people taking those kind of steps like did back then, that
Mm-hmm.
cleared the way for this world we live in now, where Kamala Harris could be president in a month or two.
Yeah, yeah. So as you gotten older, was it hard for you to navigate between both worlds of being
Now, as
biracial?
older, it got easier. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because you're younger, you're trying to sort out who you are.
Mm-hmm.
As I got older, um, it became easier. First of all, race is a tricky thing because
Yeah,
it, most black people are mixed. I
right.
mean, so that's a tricky thing too to say. So I don't really think I'm really exceptional in that sense. Even though my mom was white, you just look at us. We are mixed people, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think understanding that helped me. And I think also I don't really define my identity by race, but by other things. And as I got older,
Mm-hmm.
that helped me deal with that better.
Now, you mentioned that the church you joined as a college student was also multiracial. So,
Yeah.
do you feel like that experience of being in the faith community, embrace diversity, impact your approach to issues of race and resolution?
No, it was huge because
Mm-hmm.
first of all, that when I joined that multiracial church, it was the first time I was ever in an interracial community.
Mm-hmm.
I had never been friends with a white person before. I had never
Yeah.
been vulnerable with a white person. So when I was in that community, it helped me, it kind of broke ground and it kind of taught me these type of skills that I would need that when I met my mother's family, I
Mm-hmm.
used those same skills to build a bridge to them. So it prepared the way. I mean, it just helped me understand like not all white people are racist, not all white people are this.
Yeah.
And it helped me get over some of the anger I felt to a lot of white people and to my white family for rejecting me. I began to see how more complex people are. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things. We don't really have that many spaces left in this country where you have a chance to be in a friendship or relationship with somebody of another race, another class,
Yeah.
another political perspective. We're also siloed and isolated now. So that church was really important.
Yeah. I have a white best friend. When I tell you she is
Okay.
white, blonde hair, blue eyed, like, and when I was growing up, I spent Thanksgiving with her family, and her family is like white, white. And I
Mhm.
agree. I think it does teaches you different things about other races and also lets you know that everybody's not a racist.
Yeah. Did you ever believe that?
I didn't believe that, but I think that I've been exposed to a lot of things that made me question certain things. And I think especially in the recent years with, seeing black people being killed and we're like seeing in real time, I
Yeah.
think it kind of makes me I don't know, it makes me question a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, living in New York, you're exposed to so many different people.
Yeah, but
And
New York is a little different than the South though.
it's a lot different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would think because it's so different, that it would be harder for you to develop these kind of blanket assumptions about all types of people because you're constantly exposed to different people in New York.
I am, but I feel like in New York, because it's so broad and there's so many different type of cultures, like I don't really experience racism in New York as I would in the South. And I was born in New York, but I was raised in Tennessee. So like,
Oh,
yeah, so I had like the best of both worlds. And like it's sometimes when I go home in the South, like it's not racist like how it used to be, but there's been times when I was a kid where I used to be like, you can feel it, you know?
yeah. What part of Tennessee?
Memphis.
Ah, Memphis. I've been there. Okay.
It's
Okay.
like you had a good time in Memphis the way you smile.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I have good memories of Memphis. Yeah. I have a good buddy of mine's from Memphis. Yeah.
Now, another thing that I loved about your story is you also, your book also served as a reflection of American history. So, how did you navigate the balance between sharing your own experiences and weaving in the societal and political movements of the time?
Oh, that's a good writer's question.
Listen, when I tell you I came with my A game for you, I was not playing no games.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Um, I think I was able to do it because my experience as a journalist. So
Hmm.
when you're writing about race in this country, you can't help but have a lot of experience writing about history.
Right.
So I wanted to always place my story in some kind of historical context so people could understand that it wasn't just an isolated story. My story is part of these larger changes. And the
Right.
balance I try to find is to just kind of sprinkle the history through the story. Don't bog it down with a lot of history, but just a little bit to give some perspective,
Hmm.
just enough to so the reader could understand, but to understand that the heart of the story is not the history, but the people. But the history
Right.
gives you more appreciation. For example, if when I talk about the history of these anti-miscegenation laws, these laws that said that black and white people couldn't marry. I told a story about Harry Belafonte, how in
Hmm.
1968 he's singing a duet with this white singer on a show, and she touches his arm.
Hmm.
There's this huge international uproar because a white woman touched the arm of a black man. Now that's
Right.
a little history, but when I tell that story, it helps explain the kind of world that my parents lived in. So that's what I
Right.
try to remember. Just hit that history a little bit and just keep the story moving.
But you know what I just thought about? Not only did you share the history, but you also share the growth of people, of the human race.
Yeah, and that's part of the optimism that's in the book. And I
Yeah.
wanted to show that. Like I read the comments from people who read the book, like the readers, and a lot of people say it's uplifting, they feel good. And that's really good to me. I mean, I think it's really hard to write a story about race that feels uplifting right now.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Genuinely uplifting, not like sappy Hallmark card forced uplifting.
Yeah.
This is all real. And so, yeah, I wanted to do that because I feel like we have to tell those type of stories. If we don't, why we don't really have a chance as a country if we don't tell these type stories.
Right. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I also believe you mentioned that you cover a lot of the rise of NWA.
No, not just a little. Yeah, I was in LA when they were when they came into being, when the whole gangster rap, the whole birth of it.
Hmm.
And yeah, I do remember talking about LA a lot, and LA taught me a lot about racism. I mean, because what I did is I covered gangs out there. And
Hmm.
this is probably before your time, but it was really bad in the late 80s, early 90s. It was just awful. And that's when I went out there and that's when I kind of ran into NWA and all those folks.
Do you think NWA played a role in reshaping mainstream perceptions of Black men?
Hmm. Well, that's a heavy question. And I can't say I'm a hip hop expert.
Hmm.
I don't think they reshaped perceptions of black men. I think they reinforce certain perceptions
Mm,
of black men, and that is the perception of black men as being violent,
right.
cuss a lot, gangster. I think it reinforced those perceptions of black men as being like hyper criminal, to be blunt about it.
Mm. And also, you gave us a flex because you went to school with Madam VP, Kamala Harris.
Yeah, it's funny. I got contacted on Facebook today by one of her good friends, who I'm good
Oh,
friends with.
nice.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so it's weird. I never met her when I was there. I think I saw her on campus, but a lot of her close friends, I'm close friends, all I'm friends with. Some of them I'm close friends. So
Hmm.
we have people in common, and yeah, that I went to school with somebody who might be the president is pretty.
That's so cool.
But at Howard, she's interesting because at Howard, she's biracial, as people talk about. There were a
Hmm.
lot of biracial students there in the mid '80s when we went there, but
Hmm.
nobody really talked about it. It wasn't
Yeah.
we were open about, like, so yeah, Kamala was there. A lot of people like her were there.
You think she's gonna win?
I think
I
it's gonna be
feel
extremely close.
I feel the same way.
I think though she has momentum. If I would put it this way, I think she has a slightly better chance of winning. I think she has
Yeah.
more momentum. Um, but it's unfortunate, that it's going to come down to just a couple states. And
Yeah.
like in New York, it's almost like your vote doesn't count. Like I'm from Maryland. If I
Yeah.
voted in Maryland, it wouldn't even quite count. But yeah, what do you think?
I don't know, man. I think it's gonna be real close.
Yeah,
I really do hope that she wins though. I think by her winning, I think it's gonna do a lot for multiple reasons. So, and obviously she's just the better candidate. So, but I don't know. I think it's gonna be close. I don't put nothing past that man.
yeah. Have you run into a lot of black men who say they're going to vote for Trump?
I have.
I have too.
Yeah. And I
What
think
do you
that
think
speaks
is behind it?
volumes. What do you think?
I think a lot of black men have a problem with women in power. Sexism is an issue.
Yeah.
And
I
so,
was being optimistic.
okay. I mean, I don't know. This is just my guess. I might be wrong, but I think sexism is plays a part in why they won't vote for her, but they can't come out and say it. They'll say other things. But I
Right.
also think in an odd way, I know this sounds strange, but Trump's bombast, his bravado, his whole
Hmm.
persona resonates with men who love that kind of macho posturing, who,
Right.
and love that. I mean, when Trump brags about his wealth and how he ridicules his enemies and disses his opponents, is he really
Hmm.
that much different than some black hip hopper who says the same stuff? So I think
Yeah.
this is on that level too with some black men.
I mean, I do agree. I do believe that there are a lot of men, black men included, that don't like women.
Yeah. And
I, I, t-
power. Yeah, power
and
over. Yeah.
also empowered, but I think they just don't like women, period. I don't
Oh,
think they like
really?
women. Absolutely. I don't think that men like when women are confident. I don't think that men like women who speaks up for themselves. I think men have a problem with, and I'm not saying this about all men, because I do think there are some good men that actually encourage and support women, especially black women. But I also think that you have those that really support Trump because that's who they are. That's who they want to be like.
I can see that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see, man. But not the black men that listen to my show because they
Okay.
support everyone. Now you grew up during a transformative period in West Baltimore, which faced a lot of racial tension and economic challenges. So how did your environment shape your understanding of race and identity during that time?
Well, it shaped it in part because there was no room in my world for people like me at the time. Like I
Yeah.
said, with a closeted biracial person, and so many people really dislike white people, so I couldn't be open about it. But one of the things that really shaped me, how my environment shaped me, is it taught me that what I said earlier, that so much of racism is something that you kind of absorb. You don't even know it. Nobody went around and said, "I hate white people,
Right.
hate your family, hate your mom."
Mm-hmm.
But it was like the humidity in the air. You just kind of absorbed it. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I remember about my environment, is that how you can develop these incredibly hateful attitudes and you're not even aware of it, that you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it. So that was
Yeah.
part of it. But also what it taught me also about racism is that just part of it was like, what can I say? What I say is that part of the heart of racism is not so much hatred, but indifference.
Mm.
We were just locked in these really poor neighborhoods with these awful schools, and the rest of Baltimore, the white neighborhoods, they were indifferent. They
Yeah.
we didn't even exist. We were invisible. And so I remember feeling that very much so. And so therefore, carrying all that kind of feelings around in me made it even more difficult when I suddenly had to meet white members of my family and say, okay, how do we become a family? How do we forgive one another? How do we move ahead?
Yeah. And another layer in your story is obviously mental illness. And to this
Yeah.
day, mental illness still carries a stigma, which I don't even understand how. But how did discovering your mother's struggles with mental health change your perception of mental illness? Because I feel like when
Hmm.
I was growing up, mental health was like taboo. So I can only imagine how it was when you were growing up.
Yeah, yeah. It was in some ways somebody was mentally ill. In some ways, they were more stigmatized than somebody who's black.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a fact.
yeah, I think my mother's mental illness, what it did, it shaped me in a lot of ways. One is that I had never, it changed my perception of white people when I met her because
Hmm.
I had always seen white people as like these all powerful people who have it all together. They don't care about us. They can't relate to the suffering of black people. So
Hmm.
when I met her, here's this person who's been in a mental institution most of her life, has tremendous suffering. I
Hmm.
had never seen that type of vulnerability, that fragility in a white person before. So her mental illness changed my, in kind of weird way, changed my perception of white people. Like they can suffer just as much. And I don't like comparing suffer, but they can suffer tremendously, not just
Yeah,
black. But I
they
think
just like
also,
us.
yeah, yeah. And then, mental illness, it really, it prevented me from seeing my mom for a long time. It prevented me from seeing what an incredibly resilient, courageous woman she was because
Yeah,
I could only see the illness for many years. I couldn't see her. So it took me a long time to see that part of her that enabled her to defy her family and marry a black man, that was still there.
yeah.
So I had to learn how to meet her where she was, not where I thought she should be. So
Hmm.
that's how mental illness kind of shaped my perception. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does because there was a part in your book when you were speaking to your wife, and you was like, "Does it seem like I'm different with her? Like, if am I
Yeah,
hugging her, embracing her more?" And your wife was like, "Yeah," and you was like, "Why do you think so?" And she was like, "Because you finally starting to see her." And I was like,
that's great. You really
"Wow."
read the book. You know this stuff. I'm in so.
Listen, when I tell you I really enjoyed your book because, I have my own trauma with my own family and stuff. And, I feel like when I read these stories, because I love reading autobiographies and memoirs, and like, when you get a glimpse into other people's lives, you realize that you're not the only one that go through things. And when you look at other people who've been through way worse shit than you have, it's like, why can't you forgive the people that hurt you if this person can, you know?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I remember. It's funny you mentioned that thing because I wrote about it this past week. I wrote this essay about that whole thing, and that was
Hmm.
really important to me. She said now you really see her.
Yeah.
Took me like 30 years or so.
Yeah.
And but that's the thing. You see somebody with a severe mental illness, it's easy to forget there's a person there. All you see are the symptoms and all these things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the last thing I wrote in the whole book was I said, Mom, now I finally see you. And I think
Yeah.
that was kind of the whole journey of the book. I went from being ashamed that my mom was white, being
Hmm.
ashamed that she had a mental illness, to finally feeling pride that I was her son, that I could be the son of such an amazing, resilient woman.
Yeah. Now, how did the mental illness on your mother's side of the family begin to manifest in her life before she was institutionalized?
That's a good question. I heard stories from her sister that as early when she was like a teenager, maybe like
Hmm.
15 or so, that she would have a really violent temper.
Mm.
At one point, she got mad at their father and actually pulled a knife on him.
Mm.
And so, but my father didn't see any of that when he first met her. And if you remember in the book, a lot of my father's family didn't see it. They saw
Yeah.
said something different. They saw
Hmm.
this woman who was really charismatic, funny, witty. And I talked about a picture of her that I have when she was like 20 years old. When you look at that picture of her, she
Hmm.
seemed so vibrant and so alert. But
Hmm.
there were signs early on that something might be off. And see, that's the mystery. Like, if she had more help, more intervention, could it have been managed?
Yeah.
We don't know, because what I didn't put in the book is what something I discovered later, is that her father was the one who placed her in the mental institution.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
he took possession of her, and that was very common for white families in that time.
Yeah.
If a white woman dated or had children with a black man, the families would take that woman and put her in a mental institution. So,
Wow.
what would have happened if he did? Maybe he got her help. I don't know. So that's a mission.
That is crazy.
Yeah, that was very common back then. A woman would be quote unquote hysterical. They put women in mental institutions for different reasons. Sometimes they were too independent thinking, or they
You
challenged men.
see, it goes back
Yeah,
to what I said. People don't like women.
yeah. Sexism is older than racism. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
thing I've learned just the last couple of years, how powerful sexism is.
Yeah. And I'm black and a woman. My God.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
hard out here.
Well, yeah. I've always liked strong women. I don't know, maybe because the woman who raised me, my aunt, who was kind of like my surrogate mom,
Yeah.
kind of like a very strong woman, and I just always liked that.
Yeah. And also your mom, your grandmother, she had mental illness too, right?
Yeah, my maternal grandmother, and so it
Right.
ran in the family, and that was one of the little heartbreaking detail, is that when my mom went to visit her mom, who was mentally ill, my mom was like, I think 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
Her mom wouldn't even look at her, refused to recognize her.
Mm.
So my mom would still try to climb on her lap to get her to recognize, and that must have been so heartbreaking. So there's a mental component, and that's, of course, that's one of the things I was concerned about growing up. I didn't want anybody to know,
Yeah.
because it's like, maybe I'm going to become mentally ill. And I remember dating. I wouldn't let women. I didn't like talking about my mom at all,
Yeah.
but I didn't want a woman to know that, because like, oh, I'm not going to go out with a guy whose mom, has schizophrenia. So
Yeah. And then your father's relationship with white women occurred during a time when interracial dating and marriage were often met with hostility and evil, even legal challenges. So, what do you think motivated? Well, I know what motivated him, but what do you think motivated him to pursue
okay,
those relationships despite the risk? Because your daddy he was
great.
outside.
Yeah, he was a character. I miss him to this day. Well, I can tell you what I think. Do you want to tell me first what you think, or do you want me to go first?
Well, I think there was a situation you said that he was growing up and something happened to his father with white people, and he was just like, ain't no white man treating me like that. Like,
That is so. What you just said is so perceptive. You really read the book. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that was key. And I mean, to explain why we're attracted to people is a complicated thing. There are many.
right.
I certainly think it was the taboo thing. Allure.
Mm-hmm.
My father was a very dark man. He didn't like being black, and I thought he felt like white men
Mm,
were more attractive. So I think that was definitely part of it. But I think a huge reason is what you just said. My father grew up in the Jim Crow era.
yeah.
He grew up in an era where his own father would step off the sidewalk when white people approached.
Yeah.
When he was a young boy, my father was slapped by a white man, and his father did nothing.
Right.
And he said my father was nothing but a scared ass nigger. And so
Right.
my father, I think part of the way he lived, he's like, I will never live as a scared ass nigger. Anything a white man is entitled to, I'm
So am
entitled
I.
to,
Right.
including their women. And then add to that the type of job he had, where he spent most of his time overseas. Now, when you're a black man and a U.S. citizen, when you're in France or Australia, they're treating you as a U.S. citizen. They're not treating you like they treat you in the country. So
Yeah.
he was
As a
accustomed to,
nigga.
yeah, he was accustomed to a certain type of freedom. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think that was part of the reason. Yeah.
Damn, I didn't think about that, but it makes sense. Like he didn't like he hated being black.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Like
Damn,
he
that's deep.
he didn't like being dark. He didn't like, he favored me and my
Yeah.
brother Patrick because we were lighter and our hair texture over our,
Twiggy.
yeah, you got a good memory. Yeah, the older siblings,
Mm-hmm.
because they were darker, and so he was color struck. You know,
Yeah.
we that's the whole thing. I hope we've evolved past that point now where we only equate beauty with certain Anglo-European things, that we can understand that
Right.
beauty is dark. It can be kinky hair, it can be all these things. So he didn't see it that way.
I know, but besides your siblings, did he ever date any other black women, or was it only just
No, no, he never did. I mean, I
wow?
asked him about that once. I said, Dad, what do you got against black women? And he gave me this absurd answer. And
What he
he,
say?
my father's pretty profane. He said that a white woman understand that you can't go all night. I don't know what that means.
Child. But
But
your
he,
daddy was wild though.
oh yeah, I would come home. I didn't know what to expect. I would come home at times and there would be all the neighborhood drug dealer, the winos, the prostitutes, everybody in the house. I mean, just parties.
Yeah.
Just, he lived like he was always on a ship at sea with his boys. And he was just, that's why I said at the beginning, I could not think of a father who was more, uh, he was more ill-equipped
Mm-hmm.
to help me understand, the divisions between the white and black members of my family and how I dealt with that. He just wasn't that type of person. He was just this man of action who just was carried along by his impulses. And he didn't even want me to write this book. I remember him calling me, saying, "I heard you telling this story. You should leave all this stuff alone." He wasn't that type of person.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wait, did he have any more kids after you and your brother?
he did.
I know
My
he
father had
did.
his last child. He had his last child when he was 57. I mean, he's
With a white woman?
yeah, a Spanish, yeah, white Anglo Spanish woman.
Listen, your daddy was not no, he was no game. He was outside. He was listen.
I know, and I'm such people would see me, and it's like my brothers would say, "What happened to you?" Because I'm so different. I'm like quiet, introverted, bookish, and he was just got rabble rouser, getting bar fights, fight back at the police, and all these
Yeah.
different children and running around. But yeah, but
Wow.
it was really important. He loved my mom, and
Oh yeah, he definitely did.
I doubted that for a long time because I thought, well, maybe my mom was kind of like this taboo relationship.
Hmm.
But what I discovered later on is that all those years she was in those mental institutions, he kept visiting her. He
Yeah.
kept talking to her. And I can only imagine that he was letting her know about us and bringing out pictures because when I first met her, I remember I couldn't figure out why she was so comfortable, my mom. Like she was like, Pat,
Like she knew y'all.
right, but because she did know us, because first of all, she had the memory when she was
Hmm.
gone. But secondly, my father was going out there to visit her, showing her pictures of us, letting her know about us growing up.
Mm.
So he did that. He kept in contact with her. And when he was old and frail, he kept on insisting on visiting her. So that meant a lot. He really did love her.
Yeah. What happened to that white woman that he brought home and he was like, this y'all new mama?
Oh, yeah, it's good. I just talked to her today.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
Margot. Yeah, the one who revealed my own racism because I didn't want to walk in public with her because she was
Right.
white. Yeah, she's still here, and
Mm.
she settled in the United States. She brought her daughter here, and she settled in, and yeah, it was the weirdest thing. But only my father would do something like that. Okay, we need a mom, so let me go all the way to South America, marry some 26-year-old woman, bring her up here, say here's your mom.
Nah,
He
that
was
is
fun.
jokes.
He was a fun guy.
Did your father relationships affect the way that you thought about love and partnership?
Ooh, that's a deep one. Yeah, I mean, I can't help but think that my mother and father, the way I grew up, shaped the way I looked at uh you say partnerships and relationships.
In love. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, because when I grew up, I saw my father live in a way where I felt like he was just carried around by his impulses, and
Hmm.
I felt like he kind of, be honest, I think he kind of used women, and
Yeah.
I don't think he ever I never saw my father be friends with a woman except for my own mom. And
Hmm.
I consciously decided, like, I don't want to be that way.
Yeah.
And I almost overcompensated. I mean, I felt like I was almost so emotionally repressed and so polite around women. Like, I'm not going to be my father. So I think
Hmm.
um, it, seeing my father made me very aware of how men can hurt women. And I was
Yeah.
like, I want to be different. And then my mom, I think, having a mom that was a severe mental illness, um, I think what it did is made me more patient with maybe women I met who might have had problems.
Mm,
Because I had problems. Like there are a lot of women who had been the victims of like assault and things like that. And
yeah.
if I met a woman like that who was carrying around that kind of baggage, I guess it kind of made me more patient with it because I knew what it's like when a woman to carry around these kind of mental issues with my mom.
Mm,
But yeah, but there are
yeah.
probably a lot of reasons I still don't quite understand how it shaped me. But yeah,
Yeah. Now, you mentioned having multiple encounters with your grandfather's ghost, a man who rejected you at birth.
yeah.
Could you talk about those encounters and how did they make you feel? Because I thought that was crazy.
Yeah, it's funny. Because I was just talking about that today with somebody. Somebody messaged me on Facebook and said, "I heard you tell that story about your grandfather on a spook podcast and all." But well, that was a part of the book. People told me my friends said, "Don't put that in the book,"
Why?
because they felt like people would laugh at it. They think something was wrong with you, and I wouldn't have put it in the book if it was just me who had the experience. But I only put it in there because my brother and my wife saw the same person that I did.
Yeah.
All three couldn't be hallucinating. And my wife knew nothing about this. But to answer your question in a succinct way as possible, um, that was a terrifying experience that began as a kid. And I had it with my brother. I didn't know what that meant,
Mm-hmm.
but what it meant to me is that even a person who, like my grandfather, even a person you might think is a monster, who's
Right.
corrupted by racism, they'll never change. My grandfather showed me that you can't define a person by their worst act. Because what
Mm.
happened with that visitation is that he continued to visit me as I
Yeah.
got older, and he was trying to tell me something. And I think what he was seeking was forgiveness.
Yeah.
The way what I say is he haunted me, but I haunted him as well. So that
Mm-hmm.
really showed me that, people more than something atrocious, that they did. And I found a lot of people who read that part of the story actually liked it or something, but it was terrifying. I never thought I would write about it.
Yeah. I mean, you was like,
But
what, 9 years old?
yeah, yeah. I
Then your wife saw it? Like
yeah, she doesn't like talking about it now, like if I bring it up, because she didn't know anything about this. Like, just imagine you're in a relationship with a guy, or I don't know, you're marrying a relationship,
mm-hmm.
and you go to bed one night and you wake up and you see some man
A
standing
white man just looking at you.
looking at him.
Right.
Then he tells you, "Oh, that's my grand." You don't know anything about this. You
Yeah,
don't know
that is
anything about this
crazy.
family history. So she was mad. Like, why did you tell me about this? Like, I didn't like telling myself about it. I don't like thinking about that. But yeah, it was really strange, and I didn't exaggerate anything. It was terrifying. I never
Yeah.
been scared again. Have you ever had any experience like that before?
No, seeing the ghost, no, but I had dreams where like it felt really real.
Mm-hmm.
Or I have like, because my grandmother passed away, so she was like a mother to me. So I have dreams with her, like one. Make a long story short, I had a dream where we was in her house, and it literally felt like it happened. But it's like she knew that it was just a visit, which is I don't know, it's kind of weird. But I have moments, but I never saw a ghost before. I don't want to see a ghost though.
You don't want to.
I don't want to see no
You don't
ghost.
want to.
But I also feel like I'm just curious. When you saw your grandfather's ghost, did that change your perspective on life, death, and also just unresolved family pain?
Yes. And life and death, it was like proof to me that there is life after death. I have no doubt
Mm,
anymore that, when our body dies, that our spirit goes on because I have proof. I've seen it.
yeah.
So that changes that. Um, but I think there was another part of the question about resolving pain.
Unresolved family pain.
Yeah, it helped me resolve my family pain because my grandfather was somebody I heard these awful stories about, my mother's father.
Yeah.
And so to realize that he was coming back not to terrify me or to haunt me, but to try to make amends, that that helped me
Man.
resolve the pain I felt. That his, I mean, I just try to think about what type of person he was, that he had that kind of will, that even the grave couldn't prevent him from reaching out
Yeah.
to me to say, "I'm sorry."
Mm.
that was something. And then I had to get to know him and to know, for example, that one of his best friends was a black man and that the last person he called before he died was a black man. See,
Yeah.
that shows you how complex people are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you seen him lately? Have he came to visit you lately?
No, no, and I hope I never do. I mean, it's kind of weird sometimes. I think like, will he come back and say, "Hey, your book was overwritten. I didn't like what you said on
Right.
page 42." But no, because I felt like when I prayed for him and I said I thank
Mm,
you and I meant it, I think that allowed him to move forward. Yeah, I haven't felt anything like that. Mm-mm.
yeah. And I really like the fact that you included his story
Thank you.
in your book. I thought that that was a way to just like show, like you said, that people are very complex. So when you included his story, what message do you hope readers take away from that part of your journey?
What you just said. I mean, are you a
Yeah,
writer? Do you write?
I do write.
Well, the kind of questions you ask to me sound like a writer because,
Mm-hmm.
you write a story. Bad stories are people that are stick figures that are one dimensional.
Right.
Because in real life, the more you get to know people, the more surprising people are, the more different sides they have. And that's what I
Yeah.
wanted to show in my grandfather that, yeah, he was capable of tremendous, awful racism, but he was also capable of other things that were good. And look, he had all these things that happened to him. He suffered tremendously. And,
Yeah.
so I was just trying to give people to make him a human being, to
Yeah.
humanize him, he would
Because he
say.
went through a lot too.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of poverty. And then just think of it. His wife, he gets married.
Yeah.
He loses his wife to mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Then he loses his oldest daughter to mental illness. And then he loses his only other remaining daughter because he's too poor to take care of her. He loses
Yeah.
everything. So, what that type of suffering, what does that do to someone?
Yeah. Then he started drinking.
Yeah. But he was a
Yeah.
man, but he was also a man of faith. I think that
Yeah.
helped him. And so I just tried to put that in there too.
Now we're almost finished, but I think this is the part that really got me when you started to speak about forgiveness, because obviously it plays a major role in your story. So, what was the most challenging part of that process for you?
Mm, I think the most challenging part was something I alluded to earlier, and that is seeing that some of the same things that made my white family members reject me,
Hmm.
some of those same emotions, sentiments were also in me. Because
Yeah.
most of my life, I felt like I had moral high ground on them, and in a way I did. I mean, there's no excuse for rejecting the kid at birth and all that. I
Right.
always felt like when I met him, I was going like, "Oh, you racist? Let me preach to you and show you how bad you were." But I
Right.
never expected them to teach me lessons about, say, empathy or forgiveness. And so that was the hardest thing to learn, to figure out that I could learn from them, that they could teach me that I wasn't always right, that I could learn from them, and there was goodness in them. That's
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing, particularly at a time now when it's so easy to just be angry over race all the time.
Yeah. But I also feel like your grandfather's ghost was the bridge between your family's past and your journey with healing. Do you feel like that?
I think that's beautifully said. I
Yeah.
said that way, yeah, I do. I mean, yeah, it was. I mean, he was like the monster in the family, and when my father talked about him with such revulsion.
Yeah, him calling your daddy a nigga was crazy. I was, well, not even nigga.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
the other, yeah, that was intense.
yeah. He assaulted my father, but yeah, he nobody's irredeemable, and he's proof of that.
Yeah. And how has the history of mental illness on your mother's side of the family affected your own mental health? Like, how do you approach your emotional well-being? Because I feel like you are a very self-aware person. And I feel like you're very in tune with yourself.
Oh, really? I don't feel that way, but thank you.
Really? You don't think so?
No, no.
Oh, wow.
I mean, no. But how did my mother's mental illness affect my self-awareness? How I take care of
Your
myself?
mental health and like, how do you approach your emotional well-being?
For me, my emotional well-being is really impacted by my faith. That
Hmm.
really helped me. like I said before, when you have a mom with a severe mental illness or a parent, I was really worried that, man, I'm going to end up that way. But I think what it did is, one is it made me cling to faith more, uh,
Mm-hmm.
to find. But I think it also, if you read about mental illness, like take schizophrenia, it usually almost always happens to somebody when they're younger. So
Yeah.
once I reached a certain age, I kind of figured out like that's not going to happen to me. I'm going to have other challenges, but it's not going to be that. So that was a big relief. But I think the other part is just I think I never really articulated this before, but I think having a mom who couldn't really use her mind the way she wanted, it made
Yeah.
me more invested in treasure learning. Like I love to read, I love to learn, I love to be
Mm-hmm.
creative and to think because I know how precious it is to be able to do that. Because a lot of people
Yeah.
can't do it. So I think that's shaped me in that way.
Do you think your mom was aware of the fact that you was writing a book about y'all life?
No, no, because she passed.
I know she passed away before the book came out, but like, do you think
No,
she,
she
no?
didn't. No, see, that's the thing that was kind of, I don't know what the word is, but it's hard for me, our relationship, because I couldn't talk about things I wanted to talk about with her. I don't even know if my mom knew I was a journalist or an author.
Mm,
Didn't care about that kind of stuff. I mean, we didn't.
right.
I couldn't talk to her that way. So my goal was to finish the book and then show her like the picture of it, her picture on the cover and all that,
Mm-hmm.
and see how she would react. But I don't think she was aware of that. We never we never talked about anything deep like race or books, my
Mm,
job. It was also always other things.
right.
And that kind of frustrated me in the beginning because I wanted to have talked to her about those things, but we couldn't go there because of her illness.
Right. And
But
you also,
oh,
oh, go ahead. What you gonna say?
I think in retrospect though, that I could have talked about those things with my mom because my brother had conversations with her like that. But I was afraid to. I didn't want her to be upset. But
Mm,
one of the things I would change if I could go back is to kind of try to talk to her more about those things, and to trust her more that she could handle it. Because if you remember, there's a part of the book where I start talking about how I began to see this other side of her.
mm-hmm.
She was still this badass, so to speak.
Right.
Like my brother tells a story about my mom seeing this woman being mistreated, and she calls this woman who was doing the mistreating, "Oh, what? She's such a bitch." You know,
Right.
you see, that was still there. I should have picked up on that and like, no, you can talk to mom about those things, but I never did.
Mm. And I thought this was funny because, you receive racism as a child. Obviously, race is like one of the main components in your book. But then you was racist toward a black man at Lowe's when it came to
Yeah,
the
that's
paint.
an excellent point, and I wanted to put that there. You asked earlier about what's hard about writing a memoir, and I say honesty.
Yeah.
That's a story that doesn't make me look good.
But I think as black people, we all like that though.
Yeah, but how many be willing to admit that in a book about race?
True.
Backstage, when we talk to one another, we can say the most awful things about black people,
Right,
about
right,
our people, but in front of everybody, you know, and it's hard to admit that, particularly, in a book, you can kind of pretend like you're this sage on race, that you're above these issues. But
right.
I'm not. But I wanted to put that in there because, like, to show people, one, this is how powerful this stuff is, racism. I mean,
Yeah.
it got me and I didn't even know it. But two, that helped me understand my aunt better. That made me more compassionate to her. I said,
Yeah.
jumping on her case, not opening her letters. She's raised up around all white people in a segregated America, and I'm
Hmm.
disappointed that she can't get raised. And here I am racially profiling somebody. So that was a key
Yeah.
to me, really connecting with her.
Yeah. And last but not least, after sharing your story, how has your understanding of race evolved since writing your memoir?
It's made me more hopeful,
Hmm.
because it made me more hopeful because I look at somebody like my mom and I say she's somebody who had no power. And if you look at it, she had like no reason to hope. She had tremendous suffering in her life, tremendous tragedy, the mental illness, she has two boys and she's taken away from her boys.
Yeah.
All these things, the suffering, I didn't put some of the stuff in the book, but she experienced a lot of hardship in those institutions she was taken advantage of. But to answer your question, but at the same time, I realized in the mid 60s, when she was traveling into this all black neighborhood, knocking on the door to see my father, ignoring all those laws, giving birth
Mm-hmm.
to two black boys, and breaking the law, that she was not alone. There were all these other people doing the same thing, like the parents of Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
And they didn't wait for judges or politicians to say these laws are, wrong. They did it themselves before all those people decided. And they created that momentum, that ripple effect, so that
Mm-hmm.
when enough of them begin to do it, the courts and the politicians had to move. So it shows me, I'm not trying to be too abstract, that
Yeah.
change really comes from the bottom.
Yeah.
Ordinary people act, and then the politicians and the judges follow. And my
Mm-hmm.
mom was one of those ordinary people who acted and created this tremendous change. I mean, I tell people she made a Kamala Harris possible. She and others like her
Yeah.
create the world we live in now, where a biracial person can be like Jordan Peele, direct films, they can run for president, they can be president. It's no big thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so, to answer your question, seeing my mom and what she went through has made me more hopeful about how ordinary people have tremendous power to change things for the better.
Yeah. Listen, this has been an excellent conversation.
Thank you. You asked great questions.
Okay, I'm getting my Oprah on. Okay.
No, you were great. Yeah, very good
Thank
question.
you. Thank you so much for being on the show, y'all. When I tell you I was so excited to find him and I was like DM him, I was like, listen, whenever you free, because I really enjoyed your book. So if you are interested in his book, please make sure to email me at hello@thephgpodcast.com so we can support him with his book, because this book was amazing and we got to get this made into a movie. I can definitely see Jordan Peele doing this. Like,
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you. You
thank
asked great
you.
questions.
Thank you. And to the listeners, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please make sure to email me at hello@thephgpodcast.com. And until next time, everyone, later. You gonna say bye?
Oh, goodbye. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry.
And
Yeah.
also, you gonna share this with Kamala friends, Madam VP friends, so she can listen to
Oh,
this?
yeah. I guess I will. Yeah, yeah. I will
You
definitely
don't sound,
post it.
you don't sound convincing.
No, I will post it. Yeah, I'll post it on Facebook and all that. Yeah.
Okay, okay, okay. Bye,
Yeah.
y'all.